On the surface, the Muddy River is just another gleam in the emerald necklace, but it was also designed by Frederick Law Olmsted to improve public health and manage flooding. And it was flooding that prompted a restoration project that affects the parkland itself and surrounding areas in the Fenway and Brookline. A meeting on the next phase of the project will take place tomorrow at Emmanuel College. To give us an update are the chair of the Muddy River Restoration Project Oversight Committee, Fran Gershwin, and the executive director of the Fenway Alliance, Kelly Brilliant. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
First, I want to start with your organizations. And Fran, exactly what does your Oversight Committee do?
The Oversight Committee was created by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs when they were doing environmental permitting for the project. Because there's so much public money and state money involved, even though it's all Boston, Brookline land, they really felt that the failure to properly maintain in the past should require the participation of citizens in the project going forward. And so a Citizens Advisory Committee, which is now morphed into the Oversight Committee, which will continue after the completion of the project. And our role is really to make sure that the public is informed about the project. We monitor the maintenance of the project, and really to help the City of Boston, Boston Parks and Recreation, and Brookline Parks and Open Space, and the State Department of Conservation and Recreation to really maintain it to the standards required by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs.
Kelly, the Fenway Alliance is mainly, I think, rooted in the cultural institutions. So what's the connection with the river?
So we are the 21 cultural and academic institutions in the Fenway, and the Frederick Law Olmsted Muddy River forms the backyard or front yard of many of our great institutions, and we really care deeply about seeing the maintenance and the stewardship of this wonderful park for the public. So we were involved early on in the 90s with two major floods that happened and affected several of our institutions.
So don't be shy about this. Talk about some of the gory details. What happened during that flood?
Well, for instance, the Museum of Fine Arts, which I'm proud to say is a member of the Alliance, they had flooding in their basement, which damaged some of the artwork. It's where they would store some of the artwork, so that was a problem. Northeastern University, students were seeing fish in the toilets, and there was some overflow from some of the flooding there. We had tremendous, as you know, flooding of the Kenmore Tea Station. It was really a big mess at that time, but it was the impetus that allowed us to start properly maintaining and stewarding this wonderful park.
What about the flood factor, Fran? Because I'm thinking upstream, and in recent years, more recent than the 90s, I've seen those waters overflow at least the bike paths alongside the river.
Absolutely, but in fact they were designed to do that. So this entire park system and even the curving of the Muddy River was all engineered and designed by Frederick Law Olmsted in the late 19th century. So his project was really a green infrastructure project in the 19th century. So the entire linear park is designed, if you look at a cross-section of the river, it looks like a big bucket. And the paths on either side are intended to flood when there is sufficient water, and then the waters recede. So that is perfectly natural, that's intended, and to a certain extent that will continue. But what's happened over the years is that there's been a failure to dredge the river sufficiently. As a result, a lot of silt is built up, which limits the amount of floodwater capacity for the river. So phase 2 of the project, which the Army Corps, they've completed the design, they've put the project out to bid, phase 2, and will shortly actually be selecting the contractor, and phase 2 will begin, which will involve a lot of dredging of the river, both upstream of the phase 1 area, which is right in front of the Landmark Center, all the way up to Leverett Pond and Olmsted Park, and all the way through the Fenway as well, down to Charles Gate.
Kelly, I think another function of the river is its connection to cultural institutions. I think it's less than accidental because it's a river. It looks like nature, but it also almost looks like a landscape painting too. I mean, does that have something to do with those institutions being where they are?
Absolutely. I mean, the Muddy River was a totally designed park, though people don't experience it in that way sometimes. It was done by what we consider a great artist, landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, and we really, in the Fenway Alliance, think of it as an important artwork, as important a piece of artwork as the art we have in our grand museums, as performances at the BSO. It's really part of our neighborhood, and it's one of the gems of our neighborhood, just like some of our grand institutions are.
Fran, one of the other things that's been happening with the river, and maybe the most dramatic change of all, is the elimination of what used to be a parking lot in front of what used to be the Sears building. Now it's 401 Park Drive.
Exactly.
What drove that?
What drove that was that flood we were talking about back in 1996. At that time, the Muddy River was in that area in front of 401 Park was contained in undersized concrete culverts, so you didn't see the river. And in fact, when I first came to Boston, which was in the 70s, you saw a parking lot, and it was called, Sears Circle. It was the landmark. 401 Park was a Sears Roebuck distribution center, and a parking lot had been paved over what was originally open river, as designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. So phase one of the project opened up the river, removed those culverts, and put new culverts underneath the riverway and underneath Boylston Street all the way to Avenue Louis Pasteur, so that now you see really a restored landscape in that area instead of parking lot.
Kelly, when I look at that area, I can't escape the idea that this had something to do with curb appeal and all the new development that's been happened already and that's planned in the future. Isn't that a factor to think about?
That the park brought the development of these beautiful condos and buildings, and new restaurants came to our area. I think very much so. They certainly promote it as a place that people can have fun and relax and stroll. I mean, it's really part of the fabric of the neighborhood, and I think why we've become so popular.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Fran Gershwin of the Muddy River Restoration Project Oversight Committee and Kelly Brilliant from the Fenway Alliance. Fran, phase two of this project, I guess, is more or less downstream. What are the big issues there? It's
downstream and upstream of the phase one area. So the big issues are, first of all, too much dredge, silt material in the river, and also an inability really to see the river in many places because of overwhelming amounts of Phragmites and other invasives.
Yeah, when you say Phragmites, I used to call them reeds.
Yes, well, there's Japanese knotweed. I'm not a botanist by any means, but they're the tall reeds that really prevent you from seeing the river. Today is actually a wonderful day to walk between Boylston Street and down through the Fenway, because over the weekend, Boston Parks and Recreation Department completed cutting back of the existing invasives in that area in anticipation of the project and to try to control them all the way to the river. So for the first time in years, you can really see the river, and you can see how beautiful it will look once phase two has been completed and the river banks are restored.
And imagine there's more to this than just how it looks. I mean, doesn't it have to do with the ability of the river to empty things out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The ability of the river to manage stormwater, to allow sufficient area or volume really to control the water. It will also improve the water quality in the Muddy River, and we can see already from what's happened in phase one, it will continue to restore riparian habitat and really expand the number of birds and fish and butterflies that are in the area.
Kelly, what about the Fenway institutions? What are they hoping for from the rest of this project?
I think they want a better, cleaner, more flood-hardy river and parkland. but they also know that they are part of helping to steward this and keep it maintained. This is a huge investment of the citizens' tax dollars in Massachusetts, and so many of our institutions actually care for certain sections of the park, and they take that on as their responsibility because they are so close to this wonderful resource. So I think they just hope to see it more used and to be more accessible to people. Our neighbors in Roxbury, our neighbors in, the lower and upper side of the Fenway, the east and the west. I mean, this is really their neighborhood park, and we'd like to see more people using it.
Yeah. Talk about whether this could be anything from sitting on a bench to playing basketball, couldn't it?
Yeah, you can bike in the park. You can, I walk to work sometimes from my home in Brookline, and I just walk the park, and it's stunning. The pictures we get just from citizens walking are really amazing.
What about you, Fran? Do you fall prey to that sometimes?
I do, and I think of it. I drive a lot, and I always think that I'd much rather drive on the Riverway, which is a parkway and lets me see the park, than on a normal street or on a highway. And I think that the restoration in phase 2 of the project and phase 1 as well really enhances the pedestrian experience in the park.
Kelly, what about the meeting that's happening tomorrow night? Because some people might think this is just for the few experts, but actually for just people who live in the neighborhood, why should they come out tomorrow night?
Oh, I think it's going to give you a wonderful overview, and really it's been designed for a layperson, somebody who may not know much about the project at all. So there'll be these great, brief, succinct executive summaries of, what the Parks and Recreation Department of Boston is doing, what the Army Corps is doing, what Brookline is doing, and they're going to be just the key, points that you would need to know. You'll leave the meeting really knowing all you need to know about this project. I also think it's a wonderful story of collaboration because it was citizens, friends groups coming together with institutions and with government entities, all collaborating to do this massive infrastructure project. And I just think there's something very special about that really now in the times that we're dealing with where you don't see that kind of collaboration working that well.
And Fran, in a little more detail, I know it's going to be at Emmanuel College, but the time and place?
It starts at 5:30. From 5:30 to 6, we have a reception with refreshments and an opportunity to speak with the Army Corps people and just each other. The program will start at 6 o'clock. We are going to be honoring Marion Presley, who's a noted landscape architect, local landscape architect, and then there will be presentations by Erin Galantine, who is the Director of Parks and Open Space in Brookline, Chris Cook, who of course is Chief of Environment, Energy and Open Space for Boston, and then as well, and quite lengthily, I think, the Army Corps team from the New England District, which has really spirited the entire project, both phase 1 and phase 2.
And Fran, I think you might have something online where people can get more details about the project.
They can get information at our website, which is muddyrivermmmoc.org.
And Kelly, what about the Alliance? You've got something here too?
Yes, we have some information. They can just go to fenwayculture.org.
Right. Thank you both very much for being with us, Kelly Brilliant and Fran Gershwin.
Thank you.